All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Now, usually when we study the American presidency, we look at treaties, right? We look at legislation, executive orders, the big stuff. But today, we're taking a completely different approach. We are going to analyze presidential character by treating the White House not just as a federal building, but really as a sociological terrarium. We're looking at the animals they kept. So, I want to ask you this and really think about it. Can a pet act as a historical analyst? Do the bizarre animals presidents choose to keep reveal more about their true temperament, their crisis management skills, and their raw executive leadership than their carefully curated policies do? As we explore this history together, I want you to just keep that question in the back of your mind. For this explainer, we're establishing a very specific analytical lens. Let's call it animal historical analysis. We aren't just looking at these pets as, cute little footnotes in a textbook. We are treating these strange historical choices as serious primary sources that can actually reveal an executive's underlying temperament, and in some cases, even their geopolitical strategy. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with myth versus record, then move into risk takers and wild beasts, examine pets as political tools, look at public relations and scandals, and finally, assessing character through pets. Okay, part 1, myth versus record. As meticulous historians, we've got to first separate absolute fact from fiction before we can truly dive into the real, verifiable chaos of the Oval Office. What's really interesting about this history is how easily we just accept myths. For example, John Quincy Adams supposedly kept an alligator in the East Room bathtub to terrify his visitors. Sounds great, right? Well, the reality is he was a meticulous diarist who wrote literally everything down, and there is zero mention of an alligator. None. It's almost certainly fiction. Same deal for Martin Van Buren. He was rumored to have received 2 tiger cubs from the Sultan of Oman, but the real record? It shows he actually received pearls, a sword, a carpet, and horses. We really have to debunk these famous tall tales first to establish our credibility, mostly because the true stories we're about to analyze are honestly much more insane. Moving right along to section 2. Risk takers and wild beasts. Let's see how this builds into an analysis of executives who actively invited danger and wilderness into their daily lives. Which brings us to Thomas Jefferson. This man literally built a cage on the front lawn of the White House for 2 grizzly bear cubs gifted to him by Captain Zebulon Pike. He kept him there for 2 months. 2 months before he finally realized, okay, these are way too dangerous and troublesome, so he shipped him off to a friend where, predictably, one promptly broke out, terrorized the family, and had to be shot dead in a basement kitchen. I mean, this shows an executive with immense, almost reckless idealism who brought literal wilderness to his doorstep before fully calculating the real-world consequences. And speaking of welcoming chaos, an astounding 40 pets lived at the White House with Theodore Roosevelt's family. 40! We are talking about a literal zoo here. A small black bear, a laughing hyena, a badger, a lion, and a calico pony named Algonquin that they actually loaded onto the White House elevator and rode up to a bedroom just to cheer up Roosevelt's 6th son. The sheer volume of animals reveals TR's uncontainable executive style and his complete comfort with absolute, roaring, high-energy environments. And this perfectly illustrates Teddy's environment. Listen to this account directly from TR himself. His son, Quentin, burst into a meeting with the U.S. Attorney General and just plopped 4 live snakes, including a 4-foot king snake, right onto his father's lap. Teddy just smiled and sent him into the next room where 4 congressmen were waiting. The congressmen thought the snakes were wooden, right up until they started moving. Roosevelt's absolute amusement at a live snake crawling up a congressman's sleeve tells you everything you need to know about his unflappable character and his total embrace of unpredictability. Section 3. Pets as political tools. So now we transition from pets as personal chaos into deliberate geopolitical instruments. Consider James Garfield's absolutely brilliant power play. He got a massive 150-pound Newfoundland dog and deliberately named him Vito. Just imagine the psychology of this for a second. You are a senator, you're walking into the White House to negotiate, and you are immediately greeted by this giant beast whose very name literally means, I will block your bill. It is one of the most direct, brilliant uses of an animal to establish executive dominance in cabinet history. Let's raise the stakes to a much higher geopolitical game. Picture a state dinner during the Vienna summit. Jackie Kennedy casually asked Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev about the puppies of Strelka, the famous Soviet space dog. Well, Weeks later, a puppy named Pushinka actually arrives at the White House. But pay close attention to the timing here. This is right before the Cuban Missile Crisis. The CIA literally whisks this puppy away to Walter Reed to x-ray her and scan her with magnetometers to look for hidden Soviet listening devices. It perfectly captures how intimately intertwined these pets became with the highest levels of Cold War paranoia and diplomacy. And look, the posturing definitely didn't end with the Cold War. George W. Bush had a tiny Scottish terrier named Barney. When Vladimir Putin met Barney at Camp David, he actually told Bush that real-world leaders should own large, powerful dogs. Putin later introduced Bush to his own massive black lab, Coney, and actively trash-talked to the American president's dog, claiming his lab was bigger, tougher, stronger, faster, and meaner. I mean, this is pure, distilled, alpha male geopolitical posturing, channeled entirely through their choice of dog breed. Section 4. Public Relations and Scandals. Next up, we shift focus to examine how presidents managed, or in some cases drastically failed to manage, public perception and scandals through their animals. Consider the number 1,500. That was the weight, in pounds, of Pauline Wayne, William Howard Taft's cow. Gifted by a Wisconsin senator, she produced 8 gallons of milk a day for the president. She was a total PR darling, actually crowned Queen of the Capital Cows by the Washington Post. But then, in a massive logistical failure, her private rail car was accidentally switched onto a train headed straight for the Chicago stockyards. She narrowly escaped being slaughtered. It's a hilarious but genuinely sobering reminder of how quickly White House logistics can break down, nearly turning a beloved presidential pet into a hamburger. Now, contrast that near miss with some deliberate PR actions. The Humane Society of Texas famously issued the reprimand, "Ears are for hearing, not for pulling," directly to Lyndon B. Johnson. Why? Because right in front of the cameras, LBJ thoughtlessly lifted his beagle up by its ears just to make him bark. The photo went everywhere and sparked a massive public backlash. Compare that total lack of awareness to Richard Nixon, who earlier in his career basically saved his entire political life with the masterful checker speech, using a gifted Cocker Spaniel to completely deflect a corruption scandal. One executive totally failed to read the room. The other weaponized public sentiment flawlessly. So, the crucial point here is this really stark juxtaposition regarding Bill Clinton. On one hand, you have monumental geopolitical success, negotiating peace deals between Israel and the PLO. On the other hand, absolute domestic failure inside his own home. He adopted a chocolate lab named Buddy, who instantly went to war with his famous cat, Socks. I mean, hissing, growling, they couldn't even be in the same room. Clinton literally stated on the record that he did better with the Palestinians and Israelis than with his own dog and cat. It just highlights the profound irony of executive control. And sometimes that breakdown in executive control is even more severe. 24. That is the minimum number of times Joe Biden's German Shepherd commander bit Secret Service agents. And that's not even counting the times he bit White House staff, once leaving so much blood that public tours actually had to be halting for 20 minutes just for a cleanup crew. When the designated protectors of the executive branch are routinely being injured by the executive's own animal, it serves as a pretty stark historical record of a complete breakdown in localized authority and control. Finally, Section 5, Assessing Character Through Pets. Let's synthesize what this bizarre historical record truly teaches us about the men holding the absolute hardest job in the world. Take the story of Andrew Jackson's African gray parrot, Pull. Now, Jackson was a notoriously foul-mouthed man who cursed constantly, and, well, his parrot learned every single word. At Jackson's own funeral, the bird got so agitated by the crowd that it unleashed a non-stop stream of profanity, so loud and so obscene it had to be physically removed from the service. This perfectly illustrates our whole thesis. These animals flawlessly mirror the raw, unfiltered temperament of their owners. That parrot was quite literally speaking for the man. When you tally up the sheer absurdity of the presidential record, Warren G. Harding's dog having its own hand-carved cabinet chair, Calvin Coolidge receiving a 600-pound pygmy hippo who fathered 23 calves, or FDR's terrier Fala accompanying him to global war conferences, a really clear picture emerges. What you should take away from all of this is that the immense crushing pressure of the presidency, from dropping atomic bombs to managing civil wars, requires incredibly unique and sometimes downright absurd grounding mechanisms. These aren't just pets, they are vital psychological anchors. Which leads me to this final, kind of provocative thought for you to ponder today. If the ultimate test of an executive is control, control over the military, the economy, the nation's destiny, what does it say when the leader of the free world can't even command their own living room? Whether it's fleeing from a runaway goat, failing to stop a cat and dog from fighting, or dealing with a swearing parrot at a funeral, these animals remind us of the deeply human, highly fallible, and sometimes utterly uncontrollable nature of the people sitting in the Oval Office. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the history right in front of you.